Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Analog Diaries. My name is Sai, and today's goal is to make an entire notebook and journal from scratch with under $20 of supplies. I'm doing this in large part because I feel a little bit like I have a point to prove. I'm trying to really show that you can make beautiful and meaningful journal spreads with very little. And actually, this is how I first started journaling back in, I believe, like 2013. And I wanted to kind of showcase this as a way to make this hobby more accessible and also to kind of have something to do with my hands while we talk more and more about journal consumption, overconsumption, and why I journal. So let's talk supplies really quick before we get into everything. Today I will be using a pair of scissors, a glue stick, a pencil, and then some sort of black pen or fine liner. Most people should have access to all of these tools without ever having to go out and buy anything, but even if you did have to buy everything that I use today, it should total out to under $20. In addition to these more simple tools, I like a little bit of color, and so I'll be using these markers that I bought many years ago. Most of these are the Crazy Art Super Tips, and you can buy a pack of 30 of them for, I believe, like $5 on Amazon. So very cheap, very accessible, and you'll see mine are old, but still kick in, and there's quite a few of mismatched other markers in here because it's an older collection, and I really didn't want to go out and buy anything to show you today. And so again, even if you don't have markers, you could buy them for very cheap, but I would encourage you to alternatively find something that you have already. Colored pencils, crayons, colored markers, or just go black and white with it. Most people have something like this laying around, and you really do not need to buy anything to make something similar to what I'll make today. Additionally, for my sake, I have an eraser and some correction tape. Both of these things were free, actually. The eraser I had laying around, and the correction tape I may or may not have stolen from work. And then I will also be using a variety of found ephemera, so think food packaging, trash, and then some cardboard that actually comes in the cat food boxes that my partner and I buy for our cats. Speaking of them, you will see one of our cats, Momo, show up quite a bit on screen during this video, and so be ready for that. Also, I am not using any notebook or journal today because once again, I don't want people to feel like they need to go out and buy anything. I will instead just be using 2 plain sheets of paper, and we will be making a zine booklet. The way you do this is you just take 1 sheet of paper and you fold it both lengthwise and widthwise in half. From there, you fold the edges into the center, and this leaves you with 8 equally sized rectangles that will be your pages. I will link a number of better articulated tutorials below, but for now, I'm going to stumble through trying to explain it to you. From there, what you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half widthwise again, and then you're going to go ahead and grab your scissors and cut from that folded edge all the way to that center point that you can see on the crease. When you unfold your sheet of paper, you should see a slit in the middle like so. You're going to fold it lengthwise once again and grab the 2 outermost rectangles. From here, when you push in, you should see it kind of flare out in this diamond shape. This is what's going to make your pages turn after you go ahead and crease everything together, and I really am struggling to find a way to explain this, so you can just watch what I do on screen. But what I've done is gone ahead and creased down all those folds made from collapsing that diamond shape, and now I have a book with a number of pages that I can flip through. This only has, I believe, 4 pages, but if you wanted to do more, you can make more and more of these little booklets, which, to use the correct bookbinding term, are called signatures. And so you can make as many signatures as you would like, and then you can bind those signatures together in order to make a larger or bigger book. Today, rather than making a whole journal from scratch, I am just trying to make a little booklet for a specific project, and so I will only be using 2 signatures. And there are 2 main ways you can kind of bind this together. You can either glue the final pages together. This is especially great if you're using many signatures and want a stronger hold, but for my purposes, just placing a piece of tape down the spine works just as well. You can make your own little book for a month, a quarter, a year, whatever you may like. For me today, I'm going to be using this entire book to journal about some of my favorite local cafes. While I go ahead and get sketching, I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about why I am partaking in this challenge and kind of respond to some of the culture shifts I've seen in the journaling community over the years. This challenge is actually borrowed from a old art YouTube trend where a series of illustrators I watched when I was young actually would kind of showcase how resourceful or creative they were by creating these beautiful illustrations and making art in their typical style, but doing so with dollar store or very, very cheap supplies. I remember watching these videos and being so blown away by the skill that I was seeing on screen, and really internalizing this idea that art is truly about the artist, about their skill level and their creativity, and not at all about the tools that they are using or able to acquire. And it was in watching these videos that I, as a young person, felt myself really feel like I could be part of the art community and be an artist myself, even when I had very little to my name and very few tools at my disposal. And I've been thinking more and more about this older community and this older culture of art and art YouTube, because there's been a lot of conversation lately in the journaling side of YouTube and the stationery side of content and online community in general about just how consumeristic our hobby is getting. And this is a conversation I've been hearing here and there over the last year or so, but I think last week there was a wonderful, wonderful video from someone who is newer to the stationery and journaling community, talking a lot about how he felt that he needed to acquire certain things in order to journal. For those of you who haven't seen it, I will link it below. But Mike over at Not Buying It talked a lot about recently how when taking an interest in this hobby, one of the first things he really came across was conversations about specific tools and about specific items to purchase in order to get started. And I feel strongly that journaling is not a pay-to-play kind of hobby. And it's really meant to be a hobby that centers creating rather than consuming. I began journaling because of therapy, when I had a therapist ask me for therapy homework to write down every day just a few small things that made me happy. And it was in this act of practicing gratitude, practicing sitting down, making time for myself, and choosing joy, that I was really able to better my mental health in a time that was very, very difficult for me personally. And I think that a lot of us that were privileged enough to join the hobby earlier on, before the community became about haul videos and acquisitions and collections, we were really able to see journaling as a way to reflect on our lives, as a way to practice mindfulness, and as a way to really resist the consumeristic culture of our world. And it is disheartening to think that there are people who join this hobby now that aren't given those same messages, that aren't given that same ethos, and that instead are told that they need to own certain things or have a certain amount of output, journal a certain way, create a certain caliber of artwork. And I find those messages so disheartening and that culture so sad, because it makes this hobby that is so beneficial, so helpful, so meaningful, extremely exclusionary. And it really robs it of its meaning when it becomes about what you have or don't have. Journaling throughout my life has brought me so much peace, so much mindfulness, so much critical consciousness, and I think that is the center and the nature of this hobby. And to see that getting lost in content and social media and the internet, I feel very protective of the nature of this hobby. You know, for me, journaling throughout my life has been this incredible act of resistance. You know, I was living in this world that kept telling me that my story wasn't important, that my feelings weren't important, my experiences weren't important, that my time was money, and that I had to be a certain level of productive, a certain level of beautiful, a certain level of skilled in order to be loved or meaningful. And here I was in that world with those beliefs thrown at me, sitting down every single day and writing down things that made me happy, taking the time to record and document my life, and in that way telling myself that I had a life worth remembering, that my life was meaningful, that my story was important. And that is so, so powerful for so many people. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, right? And I want the people who join our hobby to have that experience, to sit down every day and tell themselves, my life is important, my story matters, I deserve to be here, I deserve to take time for myself, and that what I create and what comes of this process is beautiful and meaningful regardless of who sees it. Part of what makes journaling such an incredibly important art form is that it is extremely personal. You know, until the advent of the internet or the kind of culture shift here, journaling was always about creating beautiful things, about documenting one's own life, about finding and creating meaning for yourself. I make this beautiful art to remember my life, and it gets tucked away in a notebook and put on my shelf, and it's really only for me to admire. And that act of creating, of making art, of making things that are meaningful and beautiful only for yourself is such an incredibly beautiful act of self-love. There is never a day where the art I create in my journals is going to make me rich or give me any kind of notoriety or fame or fortune, right? I make art, I find meaning, and I document my life because I decide that the act of creating art matters just as much as the final product, if not more, because I decide that my life is worth remembering, that my story deserves to be told, and that my opinions, my thoughts, my goals, my dreams, these all matter. And the act of journaling becomes this incredible reminder of my self-worth in this world that keeps telling me that I don't matter, that I don't deserve nice things, that art isn't important, that creativity is only worthwhile if it's marketable. And the act of journaling is such a powerful act of resistance against those messages. To journal is to assert that our lives have meaning outside of consumerism, that we deserve to create, and that the act of creating is just as important as anything we may produce. And that all gets lost when I sit down and I think to myself that what I made today isn't beautiful enough, that I need to buy certain things in order for my journals to be worthwhile, for them to be beautiful or meaningful. That all gets lost when someone new to the hobby sits down and decides they want to try and gets turned away because they feel like they can't afford or they don't have the skill set in order to make a certain caliber of artwork. Journaling is so much more than the final product that you see posted online. The process of journaling and of making art in this way is so transformative and a radical act of resistance that everyone can take part in, and it's something that everybody deserves. Everyone deserves to see their life as important. Everyone deserves and should be able to make art. And maybe I come across as if I'm thinking about this too deeply, but the things that journaling has brought me in my life, the self-growth, the joy, and the frankly, like the self-worth, everybody deserves those things. And to make this hobby about what you have or don't have, what you can buy or can't buy, or to make this hobby exclusionary is such a disservice to the nature of the hobby in the first place and to the people who we exclude. Journals don't have to be beautiful. They don't have to be adorned with stickers or washi tape. They don't have to be drawn in. They don't have to have any particular quality. They don't even have to be held onto or archived. Journals are about the act of journaling, and I feel so strongly that any final product is worth so much less than the process, the love, and the time that it takes to make it in the first place. And if anything, when you have fewer tools, cheaper tools, that forces you to take the time. You know, if I had a sticker of the logo that I'm drawing right now, would I have taken the time to notice its beauty? Would I have seen all of its details? Would I have spent the time with it to appreciate it fully? If I'm honest, I think that it would have probably passed me by, and I wouldn't have held on to the moment in the same way. I would have, stuck the sticker down, written my little entry, and maybe moved on a little quicker. And in some ways, kind of flexing my creative muscles in this way really encourages me to slow down and appreciate the process more. And that act of slowing down is really what makes journaling so powerful when it comes to cultivating gratitude and mindfulness and supporting our mental health. And I think that process and taking that time is something that even I need to prioritize more, stickers and washi tape and special tools and gadgets. They make the process go by faster, but they don't make the process more meaningful. If anything, they take away from that process because it's passing me by faster. And what makes journaling so beautiful is the time I choose to spend on it, is the act of prioritizing myself, my hobbies, and my creativity over other things, right? And I don't know. I feel a little bit as if I'm blabbering on, but it is a subject that I'm really passionate about and something I've been grappling with more and more as I've been sharing more of my art and my journals online. I feel myself sitting down to journal and thinking like, oh, I should record this, or oh, let me journal later when I can set up my tripod. Worst of all, I think like, oh, is this worth like recording? Is this worth journaling right now? It's not going to look that nice. Or I don't know, I keep finding myself journaling for an audience instead of for myself, and I don't want it to be that way. I keep on having to consciously make the choice to journal for myself and let recording be a byproduct. And that is really hard, and it's a decision that I keep having to make and to remind myself. And even as someone who consumes a lot of journaling and stationery content, I have to sit there and remind myself that what I'm seeing is curated. What I'm seeing is marketed to me, that the tools I'm seeing are being used, sure, loved, sure, but also sold, right? And I have to decide myself as a creative, as a consumer, and as a person, what I want to buy into and what matters to me and what my values are and where I want to accept the things given to me and where I want to resist them. And for me, because I have so clearly begun to articulate why I journal, about seeing it as an act of resistance and self-love, I have to remember that when I'm hitting add to cart, right? And by no means am I perfect, and certainly by no means am I saying never buy anything again. I think there's a lot of joy to be found in, gifting yourself nice things, in investing in your hobbies, and maybe to some degree even monetarily, because ultimately in a capitalist world, the way we spend our money does show us what we value. And it is good to kind of exercise valuing ourselves and buying ourselves things. And I think that's important and meaningful as well, but that's a decision that I want to make consciously, as opposed to just blindly internalizing the idea that I need certain things in order to make beautiful or meaningful things. And that is a huge part of why I made this video, was A, to talk about all those things, and B, to prove to myself and to you, the audience, that we don't need anything fancy or expensive to make meaningful and beautiful art. Those things are a bonus. They're not necessities. They're not necessary. They're not required. And God forbid tomorrow I lose everything I have in my collection. Even my completed journals, they go up in smoke. It will still have been meaningful. They will still have been important, because I chose to spend my time, my life, my energy, my love, sometimes even my money on making them. And whatever I gained through the act of creating is so much more meaningful than any final product. This video has really just been a love letter to journaling and to this hobby. It's really given me a lot. And it's also a reminder that we don't need to purchase anything to be journalers. We don't need to create any specific way or to any specific style or outcome. Journaling is about the process. And I truly believe that anyone can journal and anyone can benefit from journaling. Thank you so much to you all for taking the time out of your weekend to hear my thoughts and to be a part of this community. I am truly grateful for all the time that we share together, and I would love to hear your thoughts and your ethos behind journaling in the comments below. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and goodbye.